After 500 days, the fate of the Gaza war and the 73 Israeli hostages that are still in captivity continue to hang in the balance. Welcome back to another All Israel News update. I'm Hanan Lischinsky, and today we're trying to give you an overview of where we are at the moment with the Gaza ceasefire. There's talks about the different phases, phase 1, phase 2. The Trump administration and its envoy, Steve Witkoff, are making headlines. Witkoff just talked about phase 2, and we'll try to give you an overview, try to explain what's happening here in Israel and with the Gaza war. So we're filming this on day 500 of the war. The war, of course, began on October 7, 2023, when Hamas invaded Israel, southern Israel, committed a massacre there. And after the war began, around a month in, there was a ceasefire during October 2023, the first ceasefire, where Hamas released some of the hostages, mainly women and children. And since then, there has been constant war, basically until the start of this year. So January 19th, the second ceasefire went into effect. Hamas and Israel agreed on a phased ceasefire and hostage release deal that was to include 3 phases, and we're still in phase 1 of this agreement. So this first phase is planned to last for 42 days. Hamas is supposed to release 33 hostages that were agreed upon prior to the start of the ceasefire, mainly women, children, civilians, and the sick. So that's all of the hostage releases that we saw over the past weeks. That is part of this plan. In return, Israel was to release over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, some of them with the blood of Israelis on their hands, some of them with the blood of dozens of Israelis on their hands. And on the Israeli side, there was supposed to be a phased withdrawal of the IDF from the Gaza Strip. Under this first phase of the deal, Israel was to withdraw its troops gradually, especially from the Netzarim corridor, a corridor that divided Gaza into 2 in the north and the south part. And one of the largest PR victories for Hamas until now was the Israeli withdrawal from that corridor, allowing thousands, tens of thousands of Gazans to return to the northern part of the Strip. Now, crucially, under the terms of the agreement, only the first phase was fully negotiated, was fully, all the details of it were really worked out in advance. And part of the first phase was the start of negotiations over the second phase. So these negotiations were supposed to have started some 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of talk about whether they have started or not. I'll get to this later. But if those talks were successful, the second phase was to begin on March 2nd. So during this second phase, the phase that we're all talking about now, Hamas was supposed to be releasing all of the remaining Israeli hostages that are alive. So they will keep some of the bodies, but all of the living hostages would be released. Israel would complete the full withdrawal of all IDF troops from the Gaza Strip. And meanwhile, the full reconstruction of Gaza would commence. And this is where a lot of the questions are coming in now. So we've just had this big media, this big storm surrounding Trump's comments about his ideas for the evacuation of Gaza's citizens during the reconstruction, and that the reconstruction would be carried out by the US, which would take over the Gaza Strip. All of these ideas that were talked about these last weeks. And that is really where the terms of the agreement, as they have been presented so far, are clashing with what we're seeing from Israel and the US over these past weeks. So the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu have basically endorsed Trump's Gaza evacuation plan and his reconstruction plan. But meanwhile, Hamas still remains in power in the Gaza Strip. So there are areas where the IDF continues to be deployed. But all of the areas that are where Gaza's population continues to live are still being held by Hamas and are controlled by Hamas. Now, another critical point that has actually been set in the agreements is that the talks over the second phase and all of its details will continue on, and the terms of the first phase, so the ceasefire, the cessation of hostilities, will continue as long as these talks continue. So despite the date for the second phase being set on March 2, If by that date there is no agreement over all of the details of this phase, the ceasefire will continue on while, of course, Israel will not receive more hostages, and that is a big problem for the Israeli government. So right now, at the start of this possibly critical week, the Israeli government has sent a team to negotiate over these details of the second phase to Cairo, but for now we're still in the first phase. Next weekend we still expect Hamas to release more hostages, but the contradictions that I tried to show earlier between the US government pushing for a phase 2 while Hamas is still in power, which is something that Israel sharply disagrees with, these contradictions really threaten to collapse the whole deal and maybe lead to a return to war, and we'll really have to see how this plays out over the coming weeks. So just as a reminder, most experts, most observers were united in estimating that the Israeli government doesn't really want to go through with the second phase. The Israeli government probably just wanted to go through with phase 1, get all of the hostages that it can, and then return to war to destroy Hamas. And remember that Prime Minister Netanyahu has very publicly and reiterated several times that his goal is to destroy Hamas's military and governmental capabilities, and that just hasn't happened yet. And the right wing of his government is exerting very heavy pressures on him not to continue to a phase 2, not to end the war before Hamas is really destroyed. Now, this is something that the US government, the new Trump administration, is agreeing with. Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff, who is leading these talks, the new State Secretary Marco Rubio, who was just here in Israel for a visit, they all agree that Hamas must go, that Hamas cannot stay in power in Gaza. But at the same time, Steve Witkoff just said yesterday that this phase 2 will absolutely come, and phase 2 envisions an end of the war while Hamas is still in place. In addition, these last few days, there have been various reports that Witkoff has put heavy pressure on Netanyahu to agree to a second phase, to start negotiations over a second phase. And today, we're here on Monday, so today there's going to be a security cabinet meeting here in Israel to discuss the details and the talks over this second phase. Meanwhile, Hamas continues to stay in power despite reports, some of them still unconfirmed, that Hamas might agree to relinquish power to some kind of Arab-Palestinian committee that will oversee the reconstruction of Gaza, but there has been no talks. There have been no reports whatsoever of a disarmament of Hamas, and that is, of course, what will really be important in deciding the fate of the Gaza Strip. So that is the situation as we find it now. And in closing, I just want to point out a possible scenario that will come out of all of this that will be highly dangerous for Israel going forward. If Hamas agrees to give up power, to step aside, whatever that means, without fully disarming and without the deportation of Hamas's leadership from Gaza, what will basically happen is something that can be compared to the situation in Lebanon, where Hezbollah is the most powerful force, where Hezbollah has better weapons, better training and experience than the Lebanese army. And despite not being officially in power, Hezbollah is the power in Lebanon and the most important power factor in that country. So here in Israel, most people were very happy about the Trump administration, about President Trump's plans for Gaza. The Israeli government is going along with this for the moment. But if this scenario happens, if Hamas agrees to step aside but will still hold the power in Gaza, then nothing will really have changed. And even after 500 or more days in Gaza, the basic situation will remain unchanged and very dangerous for Israel. Here at All Israel News, we'll continue to stay on this topic. We'll continue to report for you. You can leave a like, leave a comment if you want below this video. You're welcome to join us on allisrael.com and all our other social media channels to receive the latest updates about Israel and the region.